Alright, let's see what the new update brought to the game. Alright, okay. Yeah, I think that there's enough content here to make a review. I think I can get started on this right away. Huh? Who could possibly be trying to reach me?
Josh, it's Dunk. They killed Second Extinction.
No. No, it can't be. This is awful. No, I was planning on reviewing this when it fully released. I'm never gonna get the chance. Unless... Okay, there's still a little bit of time. Hey Dunk, are you free by any chance? It looks like we're gonna need to reshuffle our content schedule here and I need your help. Hello everyone, local dog businessman and obscure game connoisseur Josh here again to give you another review where I rant and rave to the void about something I care about for an uncomfortably long amount of time. I don't get out much. This video was originally going to be about the amazing and absolute blast of a deck-building FPS game that is Friends vs. Friends, but unfortunately, while working on the script for that video, I received some news that kind of shook up our whole content release plan. So you're gonna have to wait just a tiny bit longer for that one, I'm afraid. But if you're watching this video by the time it's out, then I'm sure there will be a little card in the top corner here for you to click, and it'll take you straight to it. It should be right there. Probably. Hopefully. Anyways, obvious disappointment aside, today's episode is going to instead be about a game very near and dear to my personal preferences and niche interests. Today, I'm going to be delving into a little-known game called Second Extinction. Before I talk about that, however, I have to fulfill my contractual obligations and remind you, the slightly annoyed viewer at home waiting for me to get on with the rest of the video, that if you enjoy our content and want to see more, you should consider subscribing and hitting the little bell so you can get notified whenever we upload, so you can be a first comment Andy and let everyone know how cool you are. It's completely free, and every little bit of support goes a long way. Anyways, moving back on track only to derail some more, I want to talk a bit about some Josh lore. Exciting, I know. So, starting things off from the beginning, I grew up with an obsession with dinosaurs. And not in a, oh, I just think they're neat kind of way, more like a, I physically need to own every object I see related to them and want to devote my life to learning about them kind of way. These giant lumbering reptiles with their bizarre looks and all the different media based around them pandered to my mushy little child brain at a very young age, and that obsession grew with me as the years went by. I would watch the original Jurassic Park movies on repeat to the point where I could recite them in entirety backwards and forwards on command, and on long car trips, the only way to keep me quiet was to give me a pair of Walkman headphones and a rinky-dink little portable DVD player filled with all those crummy National Geographic dinosaur documentaries. I have so much useless paleontological information stored in my brain case never to see the light of day instead of useful skills and knowledge such as like, oh, I don't know, being able to function in society at a basic level. What I'm getting at here is, I love dinosaurs. This fascination, of course, naturally transitioned into video game form as well. Back when I was a wee lad, just starting to get into video games, I couldn't get enough of the ones that had dinosaurs in them. Initially, that typically meant park builders like Jurassic Park Operation Genesis and Zoo Tycoon, which just ended up scratching that silly little itch in the back of my head where I could control my own form of prehistoric chaos, committing countless violations to the well-being of humanity and animal welfare, all for my own sick enjoyment. What do you mean Spinosaurus 14 doesn't like its exhibit? Here, have a couple of Bigfoots. As I grew up, as with most kids that are into video games, I naturally grew to love the standard FPS experience and subsequent class-based shooter genres. However, back in the year of our Lord, 2013, we didn't have as expansive a catalog as we do today. There were no Battle Royale games, no Overwatch, Valorant, or anything. I couldn't afford the big names like Call of Duty or Battlefield at the time, resorting to only playing them at friends' or relatives' houses. Instead, all I had to my name was Team Fortress 2. An absolute classic in every way, and something I could probably talk about for hours upon hours in the future. However, before TF2, there was another class-based shooter that had caught my attention first. Now, ladies and gentlemen, imagine if TF2 had dinosaurs. No, not that one. I'll probably cover that one eventually, but no, the other one. There we go. Primal Carnage. Now this was a little hidden gem for young Josh. Primal Carnage was the first game I had ever owned on Steam, and it essentially taught me the ins and outs of PC FPS gaming. I logged in so many hours into this shitty little game after I'd come home from school, it was like crack to me. I was pretty good at it too, not to toot my own horn, but sadly the game wasn't long for this world and it basically became defunct after only a couple of years. It did get a rebrand / sequel called Primal Carnage Extinction back in like 2015, and it's still receiving balance and content updates to this day surprisingly, but by that time I had pretty much moved on to greener pastures and bigger and better games. But the fun and sheer enjoyment I had gotten out of that game as a kid never left the back of my mind, and I was always hoping for the day when a game would come along and scratch that prehistoric itch just the same as I had experienced all those years ago. Now, I can hear you asking yourself, why did he just go through and explain all of that to us? The answer, quite simply, is that Second Extinction was almost exactly what I was waiting for, but now it never will be. And as such, I'm promptly making it everyone's problem. But I'm getting too far ahead of myself here. I'll explain why shit hit the fan, but naturally, I'm sure you're probably wondering just what Second Extinction is exactly. Second Extinction is best described as a co-op open-world FPS action game pitting you and up to 2 friends against a hostile environment filled to the brim with mutated dinosaurs that have all sorts of wacky abilities like acid spit, electricity, and necrotic ooze turning other dinosaurs into weapons of self-destruction. This reptilian plague has seemingly taken over and destroyed the planet overnight, leaving only a handful of survivors stranded in space, clinging on to the hope of one day reclaiming what was once ours. As a result, a select few heroes drop down onto the planet's surface routinely to try and research and kill off the ever-growing dino presence. Now, that's a lot to take in, I know, and it gets even more complicated from here. I'll explain it in a bit, I promise. Second Extinction was developed by a small dev team consisting of 35 people in the relatively new creative division of Avalanche Studios group, Systemic Reaction. Systemic Reaction sits alongside Expansive Worlds and, of course, Avalanche Studios, respectively, with Avalanche Studios taking care of the more well-known projects such as Just Cause, which is a rant in and of itself for another day.
Does that happen a lot?
Want me getting shot at? All the time.
And Expansive Worlds almost exclusively dealing with their The Hunter series, which is also a topic for later review. Systemic Reaction has a smaller roster of titles in comparison, with their only games being the Swedish robot fighting survival game Generation Zero, and the Scandinavian-inspired action roguelite Ravenbound, with Second Extinction nestled somewhere in between the both of them. Got all that? No? That sucks. Moving on. The game was formally announced on May 7th, 2020 at Microsoft's Xbox Series X showcase event, and I remember watching the initial world premiere reveal and being instantly sold on the spot. The aspect of a dinosaur-themed open-world cooperative shooter was something very few had tried, and even fewer were capable of seeing through to completion, and seeing something with this level of polish was a more than welcome change of pace. The game was presented as something akin to, say, Left 4 Dead meets Destiny 2 meets Jurassic Park, where players need to think fast and shoot faster in order to survive their mission, and the game quickly garnered quite a bit of attention from people like me, who were yearning to see a multiplayer dinosaur shooter done right. After the reveal, the devs began issuing out bits of lore and other information to keep the masses informed, while the wait till early access grew shorter and shorter, and before too long, Second Extinction was released in early access on October 13th, 2020, meaning we finally got our grubby little hands on what we were waiting for, and it was a buggy mess. But it was a fun buggy mess, and the devs promised to routinely squash as many bugs as they could, while also pumping out routine content updates up until the eventual full release. However, that's where I'm choosing to cut off the history section for now, as you'll come to understand later. Next, I want to go over the actual contents of the game itself, starting with the lore and story of how the world came to be overrun with mutant dinosaurs in the first place. Now, hopefully most of you know the decades-long theory about the fate of the dinosaurs basically being sealed following a series of cataclysmic events kickstarted by an asteroid impacting what is now Chicxulub, Mexico. In the universe of Second Extinction, that all happens accordingly, and the dinosaurs are wiped off the surface of the planet. However, note how I said surface. As years turn to decades, centuries, millennia, and onward throughout history up until the era of modern man, Small pockets of dinosaurs lurked deep within the Earth's crust and nests in expansive cave networks, hibernating and waiting for the day to surface and reclaim the planet. However, as time passed, the dinosaurs went through a series of extreme bouts of irradiated evolution, resulting in bizarre mutations, forever changing them into monsterized versions of their former selves. Meanwhile, above them all, humanity was doing what it does best, exploiting the world for its resources and beating the shit out of each other. On top of all of this, human-driven climate change began causing near irreversible damage to society, with rising sea levels and destructive weather damaging infrastructure faster than we could repair. The planet was becoming near inhospitable, and because of this, NGO, consisting of philanthropists referred to as the Emergency Response Agency, or ERA, started committing billions towards various environmental relief efforts to attempt to reverse the irreversible. Eventually, all the freak weather, oil drilling, and ongoing wars made the ancient reptiles below slowly wake up from their stasis, and once they were awake, they got busy, in multiple ways, if you know what I mean. As the dinosaurs began multiplying at an accelerated pace underground, the ERA began construction efforts on various space stations called gateways orbiting the planet that would be capable of deploying numerous dropships immediately to any form of crisis on the surface, as well as act as shelter for anyone needing evacuation or refuge. Unfortunately, the project saw many setbacks which inhibited the efforts to produce the stations on time, and as the ERA toiled away with trying to meet their broken promises, the dinosaurs were ready to make their presence known. Over the course of a day, the entire planet fell in unison as wave after wave of dinos poured out of the Earth. With no way to rebuild and the losses insurmountable, the ERA organized evacuations and were able to save roughly 40,000 people for each of the 11 gateways still under construction. Then, the next priority was to get all the stations completed and online before beginning the process of sending expeditions down to the surface to gather research and try and salvage as many resources and personnel as possible. After a few years of that, we finally caught up with the game, and the campaign for humanity to take back its home has commenced, with ragtag groups of trained volunteers referred to as the Extinction Unit, or EXU as the director of our gateway refers to us, being sent down to Earth to take the fight to the dinos in order to secure humanity's future. Now, there is a little bit more lore to the game than that, but it would take way more work than it's worth to try and find it, unfortunately, because it's all tied to the missions from each of the past major content updates, and surprisingly, there is legitimately zero documentation anywhere for any of that information. So for the sake of my sanity and yours, I'm choosing to leave the lore train at the station here and move on to talking about the game itself. When you first start Second Extinction, you get met with a tutorial taking place on one of the 11 gateways, Gateway Cygnus. You get to pick between one of 6 available heroes, each with their own unique passives and abilities to exploit and play around with. Once you pick your character, you then get the opportunity to select from a wide variety of weapons, throwables, deployables, and augments, all of which I will touch on briefly in a bit. After you're comfortable with your loadout, the tutorial begins, and we are guided by Sarah, who has a tendency to never shut up and accompanies us throughout every single waking moment in the game as a voice in our ear telling us what to do. And speaking of, she does exactly that and informs us on how to use our weapons and abilities and get familiar with the game's mechanics. Altogether, the tutorial does what it says on the tin. No real complaints. The fact we get to practice against actual dinosaurs is a neat touch though, and it gives us a glimpse into the procedural destruction system at work as our bullets turn the raptors into red paste covering the screen. Once familiar with the tutorial, you then get access to the whole suite of modes ranging from normal missions to free-roaming expeditions to my personal favorite, Horde mode. Before I go talking about that, however, there are a few things that need explanation. Firstly are the different heroes. Second Extinction comes with 6 different heroes spread across 3 different classes, those being troopers, enforcers, and operatives, respectively, each with their own passives and abilities, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the thing is, I have no idea what the different classes actually mean because it's not described whatsoever, and there appears to be 0 actual identifying characteristics specific to each class. My assumption is that troopers are meant to be the main damage dealers, enforcers are the tankier heroes, and operatives are essentially your support classes, although there is 0 ability overlap to suggest this outside of the 2 enforcers having more base health, making them tankier than the rest of the roster. Going into specifics, Ortega is capable of equipping 2 primary weapons, as well as having a dash ability and a damage meter that triggers heightened combat capabilities. Jurgen is capable of hiding from enemies easier when crouched still, as well as having a satchel charge and the ability to turn himself and his teammates undetectable for a short period of time. Jack has greater damage resistance the more enemies that are targeting him, as well as a charge ability that knocks enemies back, and a kinetic exosuit that transforms damage taken into an explosion. Rosie gradually restores damage to any partial health boxes, as well as being able to place down conductive pylons and triggering a health and defense boost for her team. Sinatra is more resistant to status effects and is able to highlight weaknesses on dinosaurs and throw pheromones to attract raptors like the Bile Bomb from Left 4 Dead. And finally, Amira is more aware to dinosaurs attacking from behind, as well as being able to highlight dinosaurs in the area and call down an orbital strike. Overall, there's a lot of fun abilities to play around with, but in terms of my personal preference, I typically stick with Jack because of his weapon pool and the goofy noises he makes all the time. I respect a man who knows how to make himself feel good.
At least I know how to make myself feel good.
With each hero, you also get a spread of different weapons to unlock and choose from, as well as augmentations and other supporting items. Now, how may one go about unlocking all of that? Well, there's a few ways. For starters, some things are tied behind the contract system. Contracts are one of the main ways for you to accumulate resources, cosmetics, and other items within the game. They're just your standard quests asking you to do X amount of Y, sometimes using Z, and they then make you use a wide variety of the armory and hero roster to get everything done, which isn't all too bad considering how basic the core gameplay loop is. If the game was a bit more tough on you, I can understand how making you play certain characters would be a bit upsetting, but since all the weapons equally pack a decent punch, it's not like you would have too big of a problem. You can have up to 3 contracts active at any time, and once you complete them, you get a funky little loot box to open containing your prize. Another way to unlock things is just simply by leveling up through XP, which in and of itself isn't that bad of a grind once you get the hang of it. When you level up, you get access to different contracts, weapons, equipment, etc. However, just because you unlock something doesn't mean you have access to its full potential. In order to get that, you need to upgrade in the armory. Each weapon in Second Extinction has its own upgrade tree, and for upgrading them, you need to use research. Now, research is the main currency of the game, and alongside the other resource currencies is the final way you can unlock and upgrade items. Everything you do in Second Extinction gives you research, from killing dinosaurs to completing objectives and so on. The research is then used for the entire upgrading process. There's a chance for you to get item drops from killing dinosaurs in-game that are then integral to the upgrade process, as well as the aforementioned other currencies. These items then range in rarity from the typical gray to gold loot drop pattern found in other games, and you can only get certain drops from certain dinos, creating a sense of needing to sometimes hyper-focus on hunting down a specific type of dino to get the upgrade that you want. You need research to purchase upgrade tokens as previously mentioned, but you also use them alongside those item drops to unlock the specific skills of a weapon to use those tokens on, as well as when upgrading augments. Augments are in fact item drops themselves that take the form of the legendary gold drops. For each enemy type, there's a specific augment that can rarely drop, with each one having a unique perk to them such as extra health regen or status effect resistance. Each augment is able to be upgraded 3 times, with each one boosting the stat significantly at the cost of being more and more expensive to upgrade. On top of that, you can equip up to 3 augments at a time, creating opportunities to create and grind optimal builds that better fit your playstyle. Something else about the way research and items are earned is tied into the war effort and difficulty systems. The way that Second Extinction operates is that every day or so, there is something referred to as a war effort update, where each region on the map goes through a difficulty overhaul, changing to fit the community's activity within the game. It's a fun mechanic that shows you how the community is performing and what areas people struggled with the most, resulting in increased enemy presence. Surely with an active player base, the system is being utilized to its full potential. Who am I kidding? On top of the region difficulty, when you go out for a mission or expedition or whatever, you get to pick what difficulty you want to go for, and depending on what you reach, that will determine the amount of stars you can earn from research during that specific excursion, with each star giving you access to incrementally better loot from the end of match loot box system. Now, I know that was a lot of information to soak in, so let's just take a breather for a little bit before I talk about the campaign. Alright? We good? Great. Moving on. Now, in terms of missions, Second Extinction has 6 different mission types, all taking place on the same large map of a frozen tundra wasteland. The first mission type is Vestige, which consists of you getting sent down to the surface to find a lost research team that up and stopped communicating suddenly while trying to secure dinosaur eggs. I can't possibly imagine what could have happened to them. Once on the surface, Sarah gives us a waypoint to the unit's last known location, and upon arriving, we come to find the place crawling with dinosaurs with the team nowhere to be found. After shredding through the horde, we find the remains of some of the team, as well as a recorder documenting the unit's final moments as they come face to face with something big. Sarah tasks us with continuing the mission the fallen unit started, and sends down a scanner to pinpoint the location of the nest they were trying to find. After following the signal, eventually we come across a massive cave, and upon entering, locate nests containing the rest of the research team, and more importantly, some large eggs ripe for the taking. Unfortunately, we aren't alone in the cave, and from deeper in, a Rex storms out and viciously defends their eggs, preventing us from completing the mission. Now, we either have the option of running into the Rex in an attempt to grab each egg one by one and try not to get eaten, or we can kill the Rex and make it much easier. Personally, I choose the latter and abuse the fact that the Rex's AI typically refuses to let it leave the cave and slowly chip away at it until it keels over before taking the eggs. It definitely takes away from the fun, and it's much more entertaining to get a group together and have someone be the designated Rex bait while the other two take turns stealing eggs, but the most I got is Dunk, our unpaid intern, and who knows what goes on in his head tactically half the time.
Are you okay down there?
It's okay. Just hug the wall and you'll be fine.
I'm down.
Where did you go? You're in the wall!
They buried me in quicksand.
Anyways, after getting the eggs, you then rush off to the closest evacuation point and fight off an endless wave of dinosaurs until the dropship arrives, whisking you off to safety. Not a lot going on with this mission, must be said. It's a simple smash and grab operation. Relatively quick and mostly painless. The second mission type, Charged Extraction, has a bit more meat on its bones. With this mission, we are tasked with exterminating a new dinosaur hive that has appeared in an abandoned mine in order to slow down the spread of the dinosaurs in the area. In order to do so, we need to knock down drones to gather intel on supply caches nearby. After that, we send the supplies up to Cygnus in order to manufacture the bombs we need in order to proceed with the mission. Once that's done, we need to go to the mine and load up a couple of mine carts with the explosives and slowly push them through the various shafts until we reach the hive. The hive itself is filled with over-mutated raptors and giant eggs surrounded by this bioluminescent sludge, and it all needs to get blasted straight to hell. Once the mine carts are in position, we rig them to blow and run for our lives while the mine starts falling apart around us as an endless wave of dinosaurs start burrowing out of the ground before our very eyes. Once we escape the mine, the whole thing collapses as the interior explodes, and after that, all that's left is to go back home. I actually enjoyed this mission, although the side questing of hunting down materials can get a bit straining if you choose to land in an area devoid of resources. The next mission is Research and Rescue, which tasks us with locating yet another lost research team that this time was investigating tunnels dug by dinosaurs near the foot of the mountain Magnapetrum, which roughly translates to literally just Rock of Great Distinction. After landing planetside, Sarah gives us 3 general locations that the team might be located in, essentially making it a guessing game. Once you get to a location, you send down a scanner to try and latch onto the team's signal, and if you don't find it in that area, then it's on to the next one until you do. After finding the signal, you follow it until you find the missing dropship that is in need of repair. You call down a fuse to repair the ship and fend off a wave of dinosaurs until the ship takes off, leaving you behind. After that, you're tasked with going to the caves at Magnapetrum to complete the research. Once you arrive, you go into the caves and are then tasked with completing 3 separate scans by trying your best to stand in the general vicinity of the scanners while faced with a never-ending horde of raptors and Ankylosaurus mini-bosses. Up to 3 Ankylosauruses can be active at any given point during the cave portion, and they can be beyond frustrating to deal with on top of all the smaller raptors. To make matters worse, you can't call in your supply drops for assistance because, well, you're in a cave underground. If you don't have a way to easily flip the flatbacks over, you're essentially screwed and have to try your hardest to just not get stun locked, because if you do go down, you will not be able to pick yourself back up. After the scans are completed, you exit the cave and call down some explosives to blow the entrance, and then have to sit at a terminal for yet another cycle of data transmission before finally being able to leave the mission. This mission was not my favorite. Quite annoying. The 4th mission is Homebound and consists of you having to go to 3 separate airstrips and search hangars for warehouse dropships to activate and send back to Cygnus. Sometimes the ships are all covered in dino gunk and you need to clear that off before sending the dropships out, and sometimes when you activate the relay tower to send off the ships, Sarah blows up the junction, so you gotta call down a fuse and sit there and wait for the thing to do the thing, so you can then hit the thing, and I think you can begin to see a recurring issue here. Regardless, once you find all the dropships and send them up, that's it. Mission done. Very short. After Homebound is Black Site, which tasks you with breaching a top secret military, black site. Wow. When you get there, Sarah tells us that they were originally looking into the cave networks in the tundra, meaning there could be information about the dinosaurs tunneling somewhere in the site's server room. The mission itself consists of yet more standing at an object and waiting for Sarah to finish doing her business until we breach the server room. After getting in there, we then have to call down a series of carriers and fill each one up with the server's hard drives one by one as a 3-minute timer ticks down before all the servers self-destruct. On top of this, a bunch of burrows spawn in, releasing endless amounts of raptors, creating a very chaotic photo finish. Once you've grabbed as much of the server info as you can, that's it for the mission and you're headed back to the gateway. This leaves us with just one mission left, with that being Contact. Now, Contact tasks us with powering up and realigning a radar dish so Gateway Cygnus can eventually be able to contact the other gateways in orbit around the planet. Once we're planet-side, we are told to go to a few power stations and flip some switches to transfer power to the radar station. Unfortunately, it's still the same gameplay loop of sitting around waiting for something to finish loading before going to the next thing. But eventually, we get enough power to the station and are able to start aligning the dish. After the alignment process starts, we seal the base up with the blast doors and all looks good. That is, until a Rex and 2 Styracosaurus break in through a wall, letting in a ton of raptors as well.
Now the main problem area is up here. All of this going on up here is what's causing me the most physical discomfort. It's like a visceral reaction of discontent coming from this area. This area is not good either. I hate this, but I'm mainly worried about this.
Then, while we are trying to fight 3 bosses at once, the fuse blows and we need to call one down and sit at it while trying not to die. After the fuse is fixed, the dish eventually gets fully aligned and we can hightail it out of there whether we killed everything or not, and then that closes out the entire Tundra campaign. Now, I'm going to excuse the part where that's all there is in terms of campaign due to the fact that it was early access. The full game was going to get an entire second campaign with an unspecified amount of new missions on a completely new map and everything, which I'll talk about later on. However, what I will say about the gameplay of the campaign, and I guess with the game in general, is that it's very monotonous. I liked the premise of each of the missions and thought that they all had their ups and downs to them. However, something I noticed early on and saw as the missions continued was that a lot of the objectives are all the same with a different coat of paint on them. It's all a lot of collecting and standing in a zone of influence. Sure, it's fine once or twice, but practically every mission contains a task of you either sitting and waiting for something to load up or having to collect a certain amount of something else. It's a bit frustrating that in terms of diversity, you don't necessarily have much to choose from. This only grows when you take into account the side objectives available when free roaming. Now, free roaming is both a mode in and of itself, as well as an activity that you can just simply do during normal missions. The only difference is that during a free roam expedition, there's no timer marking how long it took, as well as there being no pressure with the opportunity to extract out of there at any point in time, and special side objectives for each region of the map consisting of simple tasks such as killing X amount of a certain enemy, or doing a certain amount of objectives within the region. Outside of that, zero difference or incentive. That's not necessarily a problem, but as I mentioned, the game suffers from overlap in terms of side content, so when the only thing Expedition Mode offers realistically is like 2 extra grave resources per region for completing something, ugh. With each region, no matter the difficulty, there are certain objectives that are gimmies and never change, such as radar towers, supply caches, drones, etc. Once you do them a few times, they just become a boring thing to cross off your to-do list rather than be something engaging, unfortunately. There are some other specific ones that are limited to a specific region, such as a gas objective where you pump toxic gas in caves in Aga Hills, and it's basically a wave-based side mode with exponentially harder and harder waves until you finally fight a Rex before the whole thing is said and done. Another example is how certain areas can have infestations where you need to kill all the dinosaurs in that specific area, as well as a rare moment during the war effort when a red zone will produce a Rex that roams the area for you to hunt down, as well as a rare black box event where you need to search a dropship wreckage for, well, a black box. Now those types of objectives I don't really mind because they are at least a little bit engaging, and even though I know what I'm getting into with them each time I complete them, it's still a bit different each time. However, the game makes you complete the same shit over and over and over in order to progress with its armory and contract systems, and it gets to be quite the task after too long. I definitely think that at the very least, randomizing the locations of the side objectives would have benefited the game immensely in terms of replayability. Now, contrary to what you might believe following that last topic, I don't mind grindfests. I actually enjoy them quite a bit when done right. And I did initially enjoy the prospect of needing to collect certain things in order to get the upgrade I wanted, but after I did that, there wasn't a point to doing it anymore after new content stopped releasing. There wasn't anything to really do outside of upgrading the other augments and weapons that I knew I wasn't planning on using outside of quests, which even then only ended up giving me a mediocre at best skin usually for a hero or weapon I again wasn't planning on using. That being said, while I have my gripes with the overlapping content, I do still enjoy the combat and gunplay of the game versus the various enemy types. The game initially launched with a bit of a bare bones enemy roster, but over the course of early access, routinely added new enemy variants with each season, up until last year at least. With Second Extinction, you have 4 different classes of enemies consisting of the raptors, bulls, flatbacks, and finally the Rex, all with unique attacks, behaviors, etc. The raptor is the generic horde rush cannon fodder enemy type in its base form, but some of its variants can pack a decent punch if not dealt with. In total, the Raptor has 7 other variants consisting of an acid spitter, a flashbanging camouflaging electric stunner, an armored digger, a horde summoning watcher, the high-speed flying dasher, the overmutated abomination, and then finally the alpha, which gives all dinosaurs around it a stat buff after roaring. In small groups, these are all manageable, but if you get a few burrows going with alphas buffing everything around you, you're in for a bit of a bumpy ride. Going into the more boss-type enemies, 2 Styracosaurus variants make up the bull category, with an armored and unarmored variant with slightly different attack patterns. In general, they do what you would expect and act as battering rams of sorts, barreling through anything that gets in their way, including you. Alongside this, they can actually be quite agile and often jump forward and slide towards you when at full tilt, and sometimes roll or slam over onto their sides in an attempt to squash you. They aren't that big of a problem one-on-one, but occasionally you can get a few to spawn at once alongside raptors or even other bosses. The good news is that the unarmored variant is quick to take down, and once you knock off the armor plating of the other kind, it's about as easy to take out, as well as it having a bonus weak point on its chest that you can shoot for extra damage. Moving on to the flatbacks, just like with the bulls, there are only 2 Ankylosaurus variants, with a normal one and a necrotic one that is constantly spewing this purple gunk. These 2 are by far the most annoying enemies in the game just because of how tricky they can be to fight. Naturally, since they are walking tanks, their backs are impenetrable by bullets, and in order to do actual damage, you need to somehow flip them over to shoot at their weak spot underneath them. The best way to do this is with explosives, or something equivalent to one, like the minigun's overheat upgrade or a direct hit from a supply drop, and then you can just let them have it. Unfortunately, that's not always reliable, and you would then have to resort to waiting for an opening following one of their many annoying attacks. This is easier when there's more than one of you, but fighting up to 3 of them solo is, as I've mentioned earlier, just miserable. On top of that, the necrotic one can turn surrounding raptors into heat-seeking bombs that explode on contact, as well as the fact that if you step in any of the purple gunk, you get stunned and slowed, which just creates a terrible experience. Not a fun enemy. Then, finally, we have the Rex. The Rex is either a pain in the ass all the way through, or a bullet sponge that's just a major time sink. It really depends on the situation at hand, but usually the Rex AI is able to be toyed with in a manner where you can get outside of its range or just run circles around an object, preventing it from reaching you while you shoot it. It's very rare when a Rex will become an actual problem, and the only time where I think I've struggled a little with one is during the contact mission, where I'm having to deal with it on top of everything else surrounding me, and I'm just in general suffering from information overload. It's a fun boss fight when you start playing, but late into your playtime it just becomes an inconvenience like everything else. Now, despite all of that yapping and complaining, I still enjoyed playing Second Extinction, and honestly I'm glad I decided to revisit it. In fact, there's a mode in particular that I think really sticks out for me that I have yet to touch on. That mode, of course, being Horde mode. Remember how I said that the main thing I really enjoyed about Second Extinction was the gunplay and mowing down enemies? Take that, isolate it, make a self-contained mode solely devoted to an endless gauntlet of incrementally more and more difficult rounds, all inside of a separate, smaller map without any of the annoying side objectives, and that's Horde mode. This mode is literally perfect in my opinion, and honestly overshadows some of the disappointments of the main game. You crash land in a remote area of the tundra with nothing but a pistol, and round after round buy your way up to a full kit and fend off wave after wave after wave of dinosaurs with various hazards such as boss waves or freak blizzards, adding a bit of extra spice to the mix. This mode alone has eaten up so much of my playtime for this game, and I am not at all ashamed to admit that. Also, to prove that I have even more nice things to say about the game, I'm also going to touch on the audio because god damn does this game have good sound design. Everything has this sense of weight to it, and the environmental effects are just chef's kiss. Each bullet exiting the gun, every time you reload and hear everything slide into place, running down a hill and hearing your exosuit getting put through its paces, the different dinosaurs and their sounds, fighting the dinosaurs, beating the shit out of them and hearing them explode into viscera. The game just sounds so good for no reason. Like, just take a minute here to listen to some of the ambiance. It's great. The game looks great too. That is, when it isn't snowing and covering the screen in white. The dinosaurs and gun models are pretty detailed, and I really like the stylistic choice of the world in general. It's realistic, but there's also evidence of societal collapse and destruction alongside some otherworldly goopiness going on with all the nests and mutated gunk everywhere, and how the mutations themselves glow this bright neon cyan color that just feels unnatural. The world presentation for Second Extinction is just superb. Now, I feel like I've covered just about everything the game has to offer, honestly. At least as much as is currently available right now. In the past, with each season, like I said, there were lore-related contracts which I never got to experience due to my not playing during their release. Also, there used to be these things called emergence events where if the war effort was going really bad, occasionally special events would happen where, say, a necrotic flatback would turn everything into a purple cesspool of bad vibes and you'd then have to go and clear that out. Unfortunately, I also never got to experience those either, and there hasn't been one for quite some time. But hey, keep in mind that all of that is set to change with the full release of the game. The new campaign, map, enemies, seasonal content, and so much more are just around the corner. I just can't possibly imagine a world where this is a build-up to something bad happening. So, you can probably see where this is going. I haven't necessarily been hiding the fact that there isn't a happy ending here. Back around the time of the last major content drop in 2022, the game entered a state of paused development. It was stated that there would be no more major content drops for the game as the team collectively focused on pushing out of early access as quickly and smoothly as possible. In all honesty, this kind of practice isn't unheard of. Pooling all future content together until the big release is fine in my opinion if handled properly, and by July 2022, Systemic Reactions sent out invitations to a closed beta weekend the following month to show off the then current build of the full release of the game and get feedback to better guide them towards the finish line. Unfortunately, my invitation got lost in the mail, I think. Or maybe I just wasn't selected. Personally, I think it's the former. Either way, the closed beta ran from August 12th to 15th, and that is all the information publicly available. Everybody who participated is under NDA and cannot discuss what they witnessed, but what can be reasonably assumed is that they playtested the new map, fighting against the new enemies, and hopefully partaking in some new mission types. Just 10 days after the beta ended, we finally got a glimpse as to what all of that entails with the full launch date reveal trailer. Now, this trailer gave so much hope for what was to come. The new Savannah map was a complete 180 from the cold barren tundra with the arid atmosphere and warmer color palette. The aesthetics of the environment itself was fantastic, with the rocky cliffs being covered in dino gunk with a crashed space station on a mountain overlooking it all. On top of that, there were multiple new enemy types shown off consisting of an acid variant to the bull, new Pteranodon enemies, a giant Quetzalcoatlus boss type seemingly replacing the flatbacks for the area, as well as a Therizinosaurus boss seemingly replacing the Rex for the area. Even on top of that, there was a showcasing of a giant laser firing, potentially tied to a new mission, and confirmation of a battle pass system used for unlocking new items for your heroes. There was so much new information to get excited about with this trailer, and it was promised to be in our hands in only a few short months, with the full release marked for October 20th, 2022. I mean, an unspecified day in November 2022. An unknown date sometime in 2023? Oh no. October 16th, 2023. Almost a full year after the first attempt at a full release, and just over 3 years of being in early access, Second Extinction has officially been marked as extinct for a second time. As the days of waiting for new content turned to weeks, to months, to now well over a year, the game's fan base has all but abandoned it. As of writing this script, and as of recording this video, there are currently 3 people playing the game on Steam. That is one squad. One squad left out of the entire fan base. Full release was set to be big, but apparently just before release, a few critical issues were discovered that reportedly would have taken too much manpower and too many resources to fix. So after a year of tinkering and trying to make it work as the player base and support withered away, the plug has been pulled. As of right now, Second Extinction is removed from all digital storefronts, and the servers are said to be shut off at an undisclosed date sometime next year. The devs have said that there is no way to release the content from the build of the full release, or even the build from the private beta due to those critical issues still not being fixed, meaning we very well may never see what was in the works. Now, as to whether or not any of that is actually true, I can't speak on anyone's behalf. Maybe after it's all said and done, some information will come to light that may shed a bit more insight into the situation, or maybe someone will break the NDA and disclose whether or not the beta in August showed any tangible inclination towards a stable full release in the first place. No matter how you look at it though, it's a disappointing end to something that had real potential. I really wish that there was more to say about the game, but sadly I think it's time for the wrap up. Second Extinction had potential. It had potential to break the ever-apparent curse surrounding multiplayer dinosaur shooters. Unfortunately, it never got the right support that it needed to achieve that potential, and now it never will. I enjoyed my time playing the game, and while certain things were a bit of a drag and certain scenarios that I found myself in were suboptimal, there wasn't a single portion of the game that I considered to be bad, or that would have deemed it unfit to play as something just to mess around with your friends and kill dinosaurs. Had the full release actually had enough time in the oven to bake and get released in the state it was promised, I believe that there would have been enough content to keep me entertained and coming back regularly to check out the latest content drop or battle pass or whatever for a little while. Although, now that'll just have to be speculation and wishful thinking about something that will never come. If things had gone how I originally planned and I reviewed the game sometime after full release, I'm sure this game would have been a guaranteed lit with like a 7 or even 8 out of 10, depending on how enjoyable the new content would have been and if certain bugs were patched. However, due to the fact that the game lay dormant for over a year just to get tossed away after all that waiting, that's gonna knock it down to a whack with a hearty 4 broken eggs out of 10. As a wise man once said, my disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined. Man, that was terrible. I don't think I'll ever find a multiplayer class-based mission game to play with people that'll catch my interest at this point after seeing how poorly that one flopped. Dunk, what do you think?
Oh, I don't know. Mortem was talking about one game with dwarves looking for gold or oil. I don't know. Maybe you could look into that?
Dwarves, you say? I'm gonna have to give it a look. It's perfect!